Shamati, Baal, Salam. 1. There is none else beside him. 1. One single controlling force. It is written, quote, there is none else besides him, unquote. This means that there is no force in the world that has the ability to do anything against him. And what man sees that there are things in the world that deny the Hauer household, the reason is that it is his will. And it is deemed a correction called the left rejects and the right adducts, meaning that which the left rejects is considered correction. This means that there are things in the world which, to begin with, aim to divert a person from the right way, and by which he is rejected from sanctity.
2. Cascading descents. And the benefit from the rejections is that through them a person receives a need and a complete desire for the Creator to help him, since he sees that otherwise he is lost. Not only does he not progress in his work, but he sees that he regresses. That is, he lacks the strength to observe Torah and mitzvot, precepts, and even in lo lishma, not for her namesake. That only by genuinely overcoming all the obstacles above reason can he observe the Torah and mitzvot, the precepts. But he does not always have the strength to overcome above reason. Otherwise, he is forced to deviate, God forbid, from the way of the Creator, even from lo lishma, not for her namesake. And he who always feels that the shattered is greater than the whole, meaning that there are many more descents and ascents, and he does not see an end to these states, and he will forever remain outside of holiness, for he sees that it is difficult for him to observe even as little as a jot, unless by overcoming above reason. But he is not always able to overcome. And what shall be the end?
Internal power is the solution. Then he comes to the decision that no one can help him but the Creator himself. This causes him to make a heartfelt demand that the Creator will open his eyes and heart and truly bring him nearer to external adhesion with God. It thus follows that all the rejections he had experienced had come from the Creator. This means that it was not because he was at fault, that he did not have the ability to overcome. Rather, for those people who truly want to draw near the Creator so that they will not settle for little, meaning remain as senseless children, he is therefore given help from above. So he will not be able to say, thank God, I have Torah and mitzvot, precepts, and good deeds. And what else do I need?
Number 4, convert thoughts to advance. And only if that person has a true desire will he receive help from above. And he is constantly shown how he is at fault in his present state. Namely, he has sent thoughts and views which are against the work. This is in order for him to see that he is not one with the Lord. And as much as he overcomes, he always sees how he is farther from holiness than others, who feel that they are one with the Creator. But he, on the other hand, always has complaints and demands, and he cannot justify the Creator's behavior and how he behaves towards him. This pains him. Why is he not one with the Creator? Finally, he comes to feel that he has no part in holiness whatsoever.
Five, always focus on internal power. Although he occasionally receives awakening from above, which momentarily revives him, but soon after he falls into the place of baseness. However, this is what causes him to come to realize that only God can help and really bring him closer. A man must always try and cleave to the Creator, namely, that all his thoughts will be about him. That is to say, that even if he is in the worst state, from which there cannot be a greater decline, he should not leave his domain. Namely, that there is another authority which prevents him from entering holiness, and which can bring benefit or harm. That is, he must not think that there is a force of the Sitra Achra, the other side, which does not allow a person to do good deeds and follow God's ways. Rather, all is done by the Creator.
Six, shells are the illusion of free choice. The Baal Shem Tov said that he who says that there is another force in the world, namely klipot, shells, that person is in a state of serving other gods. It is not necessarily the thought of heresy that is the transgression, but if he thinks that there is another authority and force apart from the Creator, by that he is committing a sin. Furthermore, he who says that man has his own authority, that is, he says that yesterday he himself did not want to follow God's ways, that too is considered committing the sin of heresy, meaning that he does not believe that only the Creator is the leader of the world. But when he has committed a sin, he must certainly regret it and be sorry for having committed it. But here too, we should place the pain and sorrow in the right order. Where does he place the cause of the sin? For that is the point that should be regretted. 7, shift of self to a lower phase called a sin. Then one should be remorseful and say, I have committed that sin because the Creator hurled me down from holiness to a place of filth, to the lavatory, the place of filth. That is to say that the Creator gave him a desire and craving to amuse himself and breathe air in a place of stench. And you might say that it is written in books that sometimes one becomes incarnated as a pig. We should interpret that as he says, one receives a desire and craving to take liveliness from things he has already determined were litter, but now he wants to receive nourishment from them.
8. We are constantly manipulated. Also, when one feels that now he is in a state of ascent and feels some good flavor in the work, he must not say, now I am in a state that I understand that it is worthwhile to worship the Creator. Rather, he should know that now he was favored by the Creator, hence the Creator brought him closer, and for this reason he now feels good flavor in the work. And he should be careful never to leave the domain of sanctity and say that there is another who operates besides the Creator. But this means that the matter of being favored by the Creator, or the opposite, does not depend on the person himself, but only on the Creator. And man, with his external mind, cannot comprehend why the Lord has favored him and afterwards did not.
9, unification of the common soul. Likewise, when he regrets that the Creator does not draw him near, he should also be careful that it would not be concerning himself, meaning that he is remote from the Creator. This is because thus he becomes a receiver for his own benefit, and one who receives is separated. Rather, he should regret the exile of the Seshina, divinity, meaning that he is causing the sorrow of divinity. One should imagine that it is as though a small organ of a person is sore. The pain is nonetheless felt primarily in the mind and in the heart and mind, which are the whole of man. And certainly the sensation of a single organ cannot resemble the sensation of a person's full stature, where most of the pain is felt.
Number 10, distance from the common soul. Likewise is the pain that a person feels when he is remote from the Creator. Since man is but a single organ of the holy Shekhinah, divinity, for the holy Shekhinah is the common soul of Israel. Hence the sensation of a single organ does not resemble the sensation of the pain in general. That is to say that there is sorrow, and in the Shekhinah, when the organs are detached from her, and she cannot nurture her organs. And we should say that this is what our sages said. When a man regrets, what does the Shekhinah say? It is lighter than my head. By not relating to the sorrow of remoteness to oneself, one is spared falling into the trap of the desire to receive for oneself, which is considered separation from holiness.
"11. The joy is a result of internal power. The same applies when one feels some closeness to holiness, when he feels joy at having been favored by the Creator. Then, too, one must say that one's joy is primarily because now there is joy above, within the holy Shekinah, divinity, at being able to bring her private organ near her, and that she did not have to send her private organ away. And one derives joy from being rewarded with pleasing Shekinah divinity. This is in accord with the above calculation that when there is joy for the part, it is only a part of the joy of the whole. Through these calculations, he loses his individuality and avoids being trapped by the Sitra Akra, other side, which is the will to receive for its own benefit.
Receive in order to bestow. Although the will to receive is necessary, since this is the whole of man, since anything that exists in a person, apart from the will to receive, does not belong to the creature, but is attributed to the Creator, but the will to receive pleasure should be corrected to being in order to bestow. That is to say, the pleasure and joy which the will to receive takes should be with the intention that there is contentment above when the creatures feel pleasure. For this was the purpose of creation, to benefit his creations. And this is called the joy of the Shekinah, divinity above.
13. Desire to reach adhesion. For this reason, one must seek advice as to how he can bring contentment above. And certainly, if he receives pleasure, contentment shall be felt above. Therefore he yearns to always be in the king's palace and to have the ability to play with the king's treasures. And that will certainly cause contentment above. It follows that his entire longing should be only for the sake of the Creator.
Like in the article, he references Shekhinah a lot, right? So we talked about this earlier. So what is this? This is a corrected creature, right? Shekhinah is a corrected creature. It's sort of the final goal, you could say, right? Of sort of turning reception into bestowal, right?
Yeah.
It's corrected.
Yes, the Shekhinah is the corrected Malchut.
Right.
So it's the will to receive which has the intention to bestow.
That's the middle line.
Yes.
Is the Shekinah a collective thing, or is it just your intention, or is it the intention of yourself and whoever is Israel in that sense? Is it a collective thing?
Well, the idea is when we say collective, we normally think of corporeal, where a collective is, multiple people in a collective. And here we're talking about power. So think of it as one power source, so it's a collective. And anybody who connects to that power source is taking, you could say, or being connected to that power source, right? So when we say the Holy Shekhinah, think of it not as something that contains people within it, but rather think of it as one power source that you connect to it.
Look, that's kind of weird. I mean, I always thought it was that the Creator was that one power source. So you're saying that the Shekhinah, which is sort of like created from the effort of the creature and through the middle line.
The Shekhinah is the container that the light fills. So you've got the Shekhinah, which is the Creator. You've got the Shekhinah, which is the container that the light fills. Basically, you could say that the combination of an ego plus a screen, right? Which, of course, includes the light. That is the combination of the Shekhinah plus the Shochen, the creator plus the divinity.
Wait, but I
Why
thought
is there this separation between the creator and the creature? Like, to what extent should we have that separation in our work?
Well, it's just talking about the concept. So you've got the concept of the screen, you've got the concept of an ego, and you've got the concept of the light, the creator. You're all including them inside of yourself, right? But the idea is that you can discern inside yourself the different details within it. Yes, Mark.
Did you see that Maria had a question in the chat, Zakai, about going back over slide number 11?
Yeah, so here's slide number 11. Who wants to reread it? I think she wants it reread.
I'll read it.
Go for it.
Number 11, the joy is a result of internal power. The same applies when one feels some closeness to holiness. When he feels joy at having been favored by the Creator, then too one must say that one's joy is primarily because now there is joy above, within the holy Shekhinah, at being able to bring her private organ near her, and that she did not have to send her private organ away. The one derives joy from being rewarded with pleasing the Shekhinah. This is in accordance with the above calculation, that when there is joy for the part, it is only a part of the joy of the whole. Through these calculations, he loses his individuality and avoids being trapped by the Sitra Achra, which is the will to receive for his own benefit. And I just got a kind of a general question. When reading through this article in its entirety, when I read something in here that, like this last sentence, through these calculations, he loses his individuality. Who is the he? It's the creature, but is it the uncorrected creature? Is it the will to receive? Is it the ego? Is it a combination of things? Who is he? What is he? The creature.
So one derives joy from being rewarded with pleasing the Shekhinah divinity. This is in accord with the above calculation, that when there is joy for the part, it is only a part of the joy of the whole. Through his calculations, he loses individuality and avoids being trapped by the Sitra on the other side, which is the will to receive for his own benefit. So the idea of thinking that he has his own individual power source, that's what it means. That if he loses the individuality, thinking that he has his own power source, and doesn't understand that he's connecting to the same power source. Right? So if you think you're connecting to your own power source, that's called the other side. If you're thinking you're connecting to the same power source, then that's considered holiness. So if each person thinks that they have their own basically free choice, right? If everyone thinks that they have their own free choice, they're basically on the other side. And if everyone's connected to the same thought of creation, and basically saying that is dictating everything, then you're connecting to the root, you're connecting to the single power source. Yes, Najina?
I just wanted to get some clarification on the parts of the article where he talks about the Creator has hurled you down to a level of filth. And I guess that's where you have discerned in the past that certain things are useless to you, but then you come back to them. Is it talking about leaving from the trajectory of gaining internal power and then going back to worshiping money or something else in phase 1, 2, or 3? What is it talking about the hurling and this sense of this type of descent?
So the idea is, you're talking about this slide. So the idea is that it's titled, I add the titles, of course, each time. So I titled it, Shift of Self to a Lower Phase is called a Sin. So the idea is that you could be, let's say, in phase 2, and your state, your sense of self is at phase 2. And then if you go to phase 3, then that's fine as well. But if you then shift your sense of self back to phase 2, that's called a sin, right? Because you've moved to a high degree, right? It would be like, it's okay for a child to play with toys, and it's okay for an adult to play with cars, but you wouldn't see it as a good thing that an adult would go back to playing with plastic cars.
Just one more follow-up. So when we're saying the word sin, it's strictly defined in the way you just described. It's not talking about I murdered someone and it's a sin, or I did some kind of corporeal whatever else.
No, we're talking about basically advancement, right? So when we're dealing with the material, we're taking it in, how does this relate to my advancement? Is there a code of law? Yes, there is. If you murder someone, will you go to jail? Yes, you are. But that's not what we're trying to deal with here, is how do I advance over the phases? And then the thing is, if I go to a higher phase and then I fall back to a lower phase because it's more comfortable, that's called a sin.
There's a section there where he talks about pleasing the Sishina, and I hear that from another layer, I guess, because I hear that it's a call to raise man. How can I really please the Sishina? How can I please divinity? Well, I can pray for all of her children. Start with the prayer of the many. And then, okay, well, what else can I do to please the Sishina? Because if I please the Sishina, I please Boré. Okay, and then it gets to get where you start to think, okay, this is, okay, well, what is it can I do? How can I have a relationship? And slowly but surely, things start to change, little by little. It's just, you see things one way, and then slowly, 6 months later, you realize, oh my God, it's shifted. That's all I got.
I would say the best way to make the creator happy is to advance. Because the idea is that more people that actually tap in to the Shekhinah, then it's called that it's useful, right? Shekhinah in the dust means no one's using it. No one's using their internal power. The more people use internal power, the more it's used, right? It's like you make this wonderful, you make a new nuclear power plant. It's got all the energy you need, and no one's using it. So that's considered that it's in the dust, right? It's not got no importance. So if more and more people start to cross the barrier and start to activate the internal power, then that it's using more and more of that Shekhinah, of that divinity. Yes, Najina.
What is this whole concept of the creator and you hurling you down to filth? What is it that is it just a necessary process? In order to get to your next ascent, you have to go through a descent, and the creator within you is like, you have to go through that to get to your next phase. What is this interplay between hurling you, and it's not your fault because the creator in you did it, but then he brought you back up because you begged him to come back up? Like, what is this interplay? What's this game that's going on here?
So the thing is that in many of these articles, it talks about from a sense of emotion. So the idea is if someone feels, right, that they committed that sin because the creator hurled me down from holiness to a place of filth, to the lavatory, the place of filth, they're actually not in a place of filth anymore, because they're feeling it. And the idea is that it's like if someone goes into a pool, it's only when they leave the pool do they actually feel that they're soaking wet. So the idea is that when you're in a shell, you have no clue of it. And when you leave the shell, that is when you suddenly feel that you're in a shell, but you've actually left it already. That's where you can be aware that you're in a shell. If someone's really in a shell, they don't know they're in a shell. And it's only when they leave it, then they're like, oh, I'm in the shell. But once they've already realized it, they're no longer there. Yes, Moshe?
I mean, I'm still working on this concept of Shekhinah, and I guess you could say, when we say, oh, we are the creator. Technically, we're the Shekhinah. It's not, we're that middle line. We're that corrected desire, which is similar property of the creator, of course, but we become the Shekhinah, right? We become the divinity. Does that make sense?
Well, we connect to divinity, you could say.
And what do we become? By connecting to divinity, we become the creator?
Yeah, by you connecting to divinity, you're going to feel two parts or three parts in that equation. You've got the ego that's doing the connection, you've got the screen, which is doing the actual connection, and then you've got the creator, which is the internal power that you're getting from that connection.
So yeah, it's pretty much the whole set. It's the whole shebang. It's everything, all the pieces included in sort of the whole thing. It's just like the big puzzle.
Exactly.
I guess you could say, yeah.
I have a question. I want to draw a distinction between me perceiving the creator as this entity outside of me that I'm trying to bring contentment to, versus me tapping into this source, this one source, and the difference between that. But there's a confusion because one of the slides or one of the things that you mentioned right now was when one connects to the source, in other words, there was use of internal power, if you will. So when one connects to the source and one feels this joy because of the outcome of noticing that internal power, then there's two possibilities. Either you're attributing it to yourself, or then you're attributing it to the source. But then there presents in me this warning, because that means that there are some that can be using internal power and not attributing it to the source, and therefore it's the other side and so forth. But nonetheless, internal power was used. I want to know the difference between that, and then the other question was this creator as being as this entity outside of me.
Once you can't use internal power on the other side. Once you disconnect yourself from the system, your internal power is turned off. Right? It would be like saying, "Oh, look, I've got all the power in my house," and then I just turn off the switch at the power source. It's like, "Oh, I've got all this energy, I can keep it. I don't need to pay my electric bill anymore." And you turn off the power switch, everything turns off. You're like, "Why is everything turned off? Everything was on. Why did I lose everything?" Well, think of it more like a power connection. So once you disconnect, it's over. Your internal power is off. You reconnect, you're repowered back on. So the idea of the other side is it gives you it says that it has no fruit, which what that means is it gives you the thought that, oh, maybe I could use internal power the wrong way. But when you actually try to do it, it just turns off.
But that slide on slide 11, I mean, I agree with what you're saying, but that slide was saying, I don't remember if it was slide 11, but it says that there was joy. I mean, there is joy because they've noticed that internal power. So it was tapped into. Now, whether they're attributing it and then going to turn it off, it's as if it's the second thing. But internal power was noticed enough for them to perceive joy of having used it, and then afterwards not attributing it to the correct place. Like I see it as three different things. First, something happened. In other words, internal power was used or perceived. And then the second stage is, who are you attributing this internal power to? And then third is like, it's going to shut off or not shut off. But I still perceive as, maybe I'm confused. If there's a stage where it actually was used, and then later is, okay, fine, who are you attributing this to, kind of stage?
If you're using internal power, you're attributing it to the right source. The thing is that after you get that joy could make you disconnect yourself, basically. Just like I said, like you're enjoying all the energy. You know that's coming from the electric company, right? You understand that, but then you turn it off because you already got a result. The problem is when you turn off the power from the electric company, you're turning off, your power. So the idea is you have the first state where you are attributing it to the collective internal power. Then you think it's your own. The result of that is you have disconnection.
Oh, that makes sense. Now, is it because it went back into, it was the one is lost back into the filling of it? The filling, not feeling, but
Yes.
filling?
Yeah, in the filling, yeah.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
I think the concept of electricity really helps because when we normally deal with physical things, let's say I make a chair and then I die, you could still sit on the chair. But with electricity, if the electric company turns off, everything's off. There's no but everything was running, I don't understand. It's like, no, it's like either on or off. And it's like that with internal power. You're connected to the Shekhinah, you're connected to the collective internal power, you're connected to the creator within you, it's all on. You disconnect for even a second, it's all off. And the ego covers you right up.
So there's a test to use it, and then there's another test to maintain it, if you will?
Exactly. And it's hard. And the idea is that when you go through the phases, you'll get these kind of tests, and it's something you can test, you can play with, you can see. Do I still have my internal power? So you try to say, oh, it's just mine. And then you see the result is it turns off. Right? We're talking here about science, right? So it's not about creator, don't hit me. I'm sorry that I made a sin. It's a science where you test out the structure. If you feel that you're connected to the source, you can know if you have the internal power. And if you don't have the internal power, you're not connected to the source. It's very simple. It's like, is the light on? Then you've got the switch on. You turn the switch off, the light goes off. So you can make more or less a direct correlation between the switch and the light bulb.
I have a quick question. You seem to indicate that shells are strong surges of emotion that seem to subsume you. I have two questions. A, is there a positive thing to staying in a shell, hanging out, checking it out, and then coming out of it? Is there any benefit at all there? And the second question about the shell was, what are the triggers that will more often than not disconnect you from your internal power and fling you down into a shell or that place of filth?
Well, the idea is that if you, again, as a scientist, if you're testing it, you might want to see the results, right? So you might want to see what happens if I try to nefariously use internal power, right? You try it out and it fails for you, so, right? So you fall into a shell. The idea is that to do any kind of scientific experiment in an environment that will enable you to get very quickly back online if you do fall into a shell. Because the problem is if you fall into a shell, you don't know. So you need the environment to come to you and basically tell you that you're in a shell without using the word shell, of course. You don't say to someone you're in a shell. But you basically probe them and hit on their pain points, for example, to reawaken them. And then when they're reawakened, they feel disoriented. They feel like, what's going on? Because they're just recovering. They're recovering from a shell. Right? So that's the idea where you need the environment to allow you that area for experiments.
So the environment just has to basically do an intervention on you, whether consciously, subconsciously. You can even have this come up from a phase 1 or 2 area, right?
Exactly.
It'll pull you out of a shell through some kind of intervention, prison, arrest, depression, I don't know, whatever it is.
Right, like we see with people that sometimes they need a certain event to shake them up. Again, it depends on what level, right? So with the corporeal thing, sometimes a corporeal event can shake you up. The thing is with internal power, mostly it can't be a corporeal event to shake you up. It needs someone basically from the phase 3, which is the group, and the phase 4, which is the individual. That is, phase 1 and phase 2 can affect you externally, which is humanity and spirit society, and then the group and the individuals can affect you internally. I know this is an article that many people read, especially when they're in a descent. It can really help sort of realign yourself back into the system.
I'm still not clear about something. Is it that the creator is hurling you, the creator in you is hurling you down to filth on purpose, or is it just because you unplugged out of your internal power? Like, is there a higher purpose for this? Like, you need to go down to a shell, see why you don't like it, come back up, or is it you accidentally disconnected yourself so you fell? Or is there a higher purpose of why the creator in you is doing this to you in the first place?
The thing is that we basically only learn from contrast, right? And the question is where you're going to get that contrast from. So one way to get that contrast is by working with the people in the group, right? And hitting on your pain points and stuff like that. And if you're not doing that, then it has to be through this other way, which is through throwing you into shells and disorienting you that way. So it just basically depends on the person. Of course, yes, it's all predetermined, but the idea is that the predetermination can go through two routes. It can either go, it's called the path of pain or the path of Torah. The path of pain is where you have to experience that rattling of the cage, you could say. And then the path of Torah is where you're just constantly collecting discernments, and that is the way you advance, and that's the way you feel the pain. You're not feeling the pain because you're going through a tough experience. You're feeling the pain because you're collecting deep, truthful discernments about yourself. Many times say that it's not there's none else besides him. Rather, there's none else besides the internal power within me. Because the problem when you say there's none else besides him, our minds immediately deitize and think of someone external, that there's me and him, and there's some kind of separation there. No, the him is within you. So there's none else besides the internal power within you.
Once you achieve some level of internal power, how difficult is it not to slip from that or to fall into the shells? How is it like you're always on the razor's edge or a tightrope, or is it can you maintain your internal power consistently?
If you're continuing to do the work, yeah. If you're continuing to express your internal power, let's say if you're in a state that you can do that already, you're constantly collecting discernments. As long as you're on that path, you can actually maintain a very strong, sustainable flow of internal power. And the minute you fall off that, then it's disconnected.
Okay, I'm just curious, how did you come up with specifically using the word internal power and not some other, I mean, I guess there's maybe another way to say the same thing, not that I can think of anything, but where was it that you finally were like, oh, that's what it's talking about, Bore or God or Creator, what it's talking about is this. I'm just curious about your use of this particular vocabulary or how you came.
First of all, I heard Rav himself say it. So Rav many times will say, he'll call it koch pnimi, which is internal power. That's number one. In the earlier books, he referenced it more than he does today. That's number two. Number three, it's a very egoistical set of words that register in a person. If I said to you, bestowal, you wouldn't have anything. Your ego wouldn't register to anything. But when you say to someone internal power, they can understand power, and they can understand internal. So it registers in their ego that something can say to someone, let me give you power, let me give you control, right? And if you look at the evil people in the movies, that's normally what they're after. They're after power and control. So the idea is that the ego registers on the ego. There's two words of internal power. But if you use bestowal, if you use influence, if you use like any more altruistic words, then it just doesn't register in a person.
Well, I was just going to say, I could not understand when I first watched your lectures when you kept saying internal power until I finally heard you say for the first time, it means control. Once you said that, I was like, oh, this is what he meant the whole time. So control is like much more easily digestible, I guess, in that sense.
I just want to add to that. It's this control is basically basically this internal power. This control is like, basically feeling like you're in control of reality, right? So like whatever, it's basically give you this power, or like whatever situation you're faced with, you feel like you're in control, because the whole path of Kabbalah, the reason most of us came here is this lack of control, this lack of like, why is my, what's happening to my life? What's going on? I don't know what's going on here. And then once you start to gain this internal power, you gain this sense of control. So the more internal power you build, or you reveal, really, is just revealing and giving you that great sense of control. So I think that really kind of made sense to me.
Power, is it a manipulation of that, or is it just using its natural attributes to manipulate it?
Well, for me, it's just like, you can say manipulate, but you can also say just like, you just feel empowered, and you feel like a sense of control. You feel like that you haven't lost that power, of like, when things just seem like, oh, it's really going really bad for me, but you're like, yeah, no, this is good for me. I want this to happen. And that gives you that control, of actually believing it and not really just saying it,
Well, I mean, the control that you're speaking of, is it because you know the attributes of whatever you're dealing with, and thereby, by knowing how it reacts and is going to react to different stimuli, thereby you understand it and can control it? Or is it like a control of where you're changing it and manipulating it by the changes?
Well, for me right now, just where I'm at, right, it's just more of like understanding reality and understanding how it works and accepting it and feeling like it's not running me over, basically. Like I'm feeling like by me sort of accepting it and believing that, and like you get that sense of control. Otherwise, if we feel like reality is just running you over, and it's that's not control, that's not power. But when you're the more, I guess you could say, the more you reveal the creator, the more internal power you gain. You just can face situations that you could never face before. Like you'd see things in a higher perception, and you just feel like, yeah, this is good. This is exactly what I wanted. And that gives you that control. Because before, if you didn't get things that you wanted, you'd be like, it's just reality is just running you over, and you don't feel that control. And that's the thing. It's like when I'm, if I'm in a descent or something, it always comes back down to, and I've really sort of pinned it down to what it is. It's not, oh, I'm not getting this, or I feel terrible. It's just it really comes down to, I just don't feel like I'm in control. I have a lack of control. And that for me, it was like a revelation to me. And then it's just, okay, so that's what it is. All right, so now I have to just continue to reveal the creator and gain more control, more bestowal, more power. So that the night when that situation comes around again, I'm like, yeah, it's no problem. It's fine. Exactly. It's exactly what I wanted.
Well, the reason I kind of asked that question is because I kind of see it as the only true control is no control. In other words, you use it as its natural attributes show to you in the states that it goes through and changes, rather than trying to manipulate it and change it and move it to where you want it to be. In other words, you just use it the way it naturally occurs, rather than try to turn it into like an isotope or something else to do what you want.
I wanted to also ask or draw a distinction. Let's say I've seen phase one, someone in phase one that has no point in the heart, no study of Kabbalah. Let's say they have a cancer. They've shown control over the situation. They're very much at peace. It is as well. I accept. Meaning they're able to go above this pain and in a matter of acceptance of knowing, there's a reason for it, things like that, versus someone that, on the other hand, on top of that, has an internal control over the situation, meaning not only that I'm able to go through, let's say, a corporeal situation or a descent and an ascent and be not seemingly affected by it, but versus what is the distinction then with the degrees of control over the situation, meaning still being in it, but then still be able to influence this situation for the future? What's the difference between how a phase one can be in no pain with the situation or deal with it in a situation versus someone with now more internal control?
I would say normally when, in any phase, right, below the barrier, when they're wanting something to go right, they have to annul themselves. They have to reduce their desire. They have to say, oh, I'm just going to accept what reality throws at me, and I'm going to have no desire of my own at all. Right? That's the annulment method as well. In Kabbalah, what we say is we're going to have both opposite concepts in one. So we're going to be this left line desire where I want something to happen, damn it. And I've got this right line of, oh, I know that the system, or whatever the system gives me, I'll accept. And the idea is you're combining these two opposites into one, which is a middle line, where you have a goal that you want to reach. But the way reality will make you reach it, you're very flexible with. So the goal is absolute. The path to get there is flexible. You allow reality to sort of shape it, right? The idea is that you don't have to actually want to be aware of all the little details to take into account. You let the system have to do that for you. You don't need to deal with that kind of information. You have to just work on the intention. What do you want to get? And then you allow the system to actually manipulate of what events it's actually going to do to reach that desired goal. So, for example, let's say you want to awaken someone, right? You want to get somebody out of a shell. So what you're going to do is you're going to have the intention of getting that person out of that shell. You're going to put your desire on that person, saying, I want that person out of a shell. The result is that the system gives them a flat tire, or that the system gives them that disorientation and sort of like shakes them up, right? So you don't have to think of all the details, right, of how to implement it. You only have to focus on the intention. And so the desire, your ego, that left line is on the intention. The way that the system will manipulate things to get there, you're actually annulling and allowing the system to say, you know what, you do it the way you want it. It's like when a mafia king is like, oh, it would be a shame if something would happen to so-and-so, right? He doesn't actually want to deal with all the small details of how to actually get to that person and deal with him. He just wants to give this sort of intention. I put it out there into the system saying, it'd be a shame if something would happen to Mr. Anderson, right? And it's like, and then the system is like, oh, that's what you want, boss. Oh, no problem. He goes and breaks his fingers off or something. You know what I mean? There's that you've got those two opposite lines in one, where you've got the intention, but you're not caring of how it actually comes into fruition.
I understand that you're talking about a person is only in the soul and that quality of the soul only if they have enough internal power. And I just keep trying to think of myself, like, for example, in a phase 1, when I was I had a lot of fun manipulating people, running around, manipulating situations. When I hit phase 2, I was disgusted with my behavior. So then you start completely annulling and saying, I'm going to become Mother Teresa and I'm going to save the world and help everyone and whatever. When you're talking about above the barrier and you acquire that power of the soul, that just means I have internal power that I can now use. But is there some kind of ethics, some kind of direction that you can only use this for the good? Or, I mean, how does it work as opposed to like in phase 1 where you're really not caring about who you're using it against, this sense of control, let's say, and how it affects them? What is this shift that happens to you? Are you really altruistic in that sense? I mean, do you become altruistic and have internal power and are now able to use it in a targeted way, and you cannot use it for quote unquote evil? What is it that's going on there?
What made you in phase 2 think that your behavior you were doing in phase 1 was despicable?
I hurt a lot of people.
Is that the only reason that you caused people pain, or was it why you caused them pain?
Both.
For example, as a father or a mother, when you have children, you will sometimes cause them pain, right? Out of education purposes, right? The kid will want to eat a certain food that he likes, right? Let's say candy, and you don't give it to him, and they cry. So you're causing them pain. They want candy, you're not giving to them, right? But you wouldn't consider that bad now, would you? So the problem is not the pain. So what is the problem? Just the intention. Would you agree with that?
Yes. The intention there is a complete reckless disregard for others. But yes, you're right. It's you as the operator who has some sort of deficiency, which is why you wield your psychosis on everyone around you, I guess.
So the idea is that there's a few differences between external power and internal power. One of the major differences is that with external power, you can trace it, right? If I go and sort of attack one of you, you could trace it, right? You could be like, he went here, he broke into my house, here's the DNA or the footprints or the fingerprints, whatever, right? You can trace it. And even if I was very sneaky, in the end I could be caught, right? Because that's external. You could have a camera, you could check it out and catch me in the end. That's with external power. With internal power, it's untraceable. Totally untraceable. Because, for example, let's say I implant into you a certain thought. There's nothing that tells you that I sent you that thought. Not only that, but you couldn't even blame me for that. It wouldn't hold in any kind of court of law, right? You couldn't be like, Your Honor, Zachary Hamilton in Israel sent me, a thought when I was in America. It's like, really? Like, do you have any proof whatsoever? You would have none, right? It would be useless in a court of law. So internal power is totally untraceable, right? Just like we say that if you become the creator, we say the creator is untraceable as well, right? We're all just puppets, right? And it's all predetermined, but there's no direct connection that you can say, oh, it was the creator. It wasn't Hitler. It was the creator. No one says that. Everyone's like, oh, it's Hitler. He's an individual. He is a person. He had his own thoughts and mind, and he did it, right? And no one wants to go and start saying it was the creator. So that's the second thing. So it's untraceable. Another thing is that if you have the goal of creation, right, which is what will enable you to connect to this reservoir of internal power, then you can use it. So the idea is you can only use this untraceable power if it's going to move creation forward. And if it's not going to move creation forward, you're not going to be able to use this power source.
Okay, so there are limits by the system on you. I also wanted to comment that you're right, internal power is not traceable per se, but if you understand what Inception is, and that's why that movie's so great, you can actually trace where someone did Inception on you. Whatever it is they said, how they looked at you, you can trace it and pinpoint it down to a point, actually, if you understand that it's even possible and that it's happening. So it is traceable.
But there it's traceable because there's an external manifestation that is enabling that situation. And here, there's nothing. I don't have to wear any headset. I don't have to go and meet you. I don't have to drug you, nothing. Right? The idea is that it's untraceable. There's no point where you can say, oh, I can see that this person was applying his desire on another person.
Well, they could be sitting in a room and desiring that state and boom, boom, boom. And you can know where the source
How
of
do you
that.
know? What, how are you going to go trace through 8 billion people to find out who was the person who had internal power, which was using his desire to manipulate somebody else?
Well, if there's only a handful of them on Earth, so you got to figure the 8 billion people are not really a problem for you, correct?
Yeah, but you'd have to find them out now, wouldn't you?
Oh,
It wouldn't hold in any court of law, right?
no, it's not. This is not a court of law kind of thing.
Right, and that's what it means that it's untraceable. Because one of the things with internal power is that you can have two people. One person thinks it's their own desire. The other person is manipulating that. The first person, they're both right. The first person has his own original thought, and the second person gave him that original thought. So they're both right.
Wait, explain that again?
You got two people, you got person A and person B. Person A thinks that he had an original thought. Person B gave him that original thought. They're both right. That's how internal power works. It's symbiotic control. So let's say you got two people at the end of correction. They both got internal power, and they're both spending their desire on each other. Who wins? It's symbiotic. It levels itself out. Right? So it's unlike with external power, where there's always going to be someone who's stronger than the other. Right? In internal power, there's that unity aspect. There's that inclusive aspect that doesn't exist within external power. If you're the king, that means I'm not the king on something. If I own land, that means you don't own the land. Right? There's more of that exclusive ownership. And with internal power, it's inclusive ownership.
So you're saying internal power in these high phases above the HaSulam has purely to do with intention powered by desire to do good for the whole of the system. So you're not going to harm people even with your own thoughts. It's not about not creating pain for them. If you're going to touch their pain points, yes, they're going to be in pain. So you're saying there is no desire to do harm, instead to promote the system into harmony and symbiosis. So you can't basically do what you did in phase one. Is that correct?
Well, again, the question is, what is the definition of harm? Right? If I cause you intense pain by touching your pain point, is that harm?
No, that's great. That's for advancement. So that's a positive for a higher purpose. So it's not really defined by the pain you caused.
Yeah, but you won't sense it as that. You won't be like, oh, it's for a higher purpose. It's like, where do I get the nerve? Who gave me the permission to do that to you? Right? I can't break into your house and put $100 bills inside your house. That's trespassing. Right? And I could be put in jail for that. It's like, Your Honor, I put money in a house. The law doesn't care what you put in the house. If you're breaking an entry, it doesn't matter if you put flowers inside. Right? So who gives a Kabbalist the permission to go, meddling with the system?
Who?
The system. Right? The system is above the law. Right? So if the system approves someone to be an employee of the system, they get to be above the law.
Well, is there a lawlessness in the system? What is that?
What do you mean?
Well, the system is above the law, but I'm guessing there is some kind of law within the system that's above the
Yes,
law.
there is. Yes, there
Think
is.
about
There's laws for the employee as well. Right? So you've got laws for think of it like a bank. Okay? You've got the bank manager and you've got the customer. The customer has its own set of laws and the bank manager has a different set of laws. Right? So they're both under laws, but they're different laws. It's like the police also have laws, but police are in many sense above the normal law of normal people. Right? They can go in the opposite lanes when they need to go for on a car chase. It's like, but the law says you're not allowed to do that. They're above the law in that situation. But is there a law to moderate them as well? Yes, there is. So the same with spirituality. There is a set of laws. But if you learn them, you can know how to use them correctly.
So is there a code of laws you've compiled which govern this? Please produce them. We're in anticipation of the code.
The difference is in spirituality, you test it out. Right? So unlike, you don't in physicality go rob a bank and test out if it works or not. And then they send you to jail. You're like, oh, okay, that's the result. Right? You're not going to do that, right? Otherwise you're going to have a very short life. But with spiritual, we've got much more room to experiment because first of all, we get immediate results, and number two, it's not about other people, right? There's no one else who can look at you and say, "Hey, you're not using that right." So therefore, the system is fixed and predetermined in that sense that you can't go outside of the law. You have the freedom to test it as much as you want.
So you just said that there's no time lag when you're doing this in spirituality. In corporeality, if you rob a bank, it might take 6 months before they find you and pull you into jail. Are you saying that there's no time lag whatsoever in spirituality? If you test it, immediate results, one way or the other.
Exactly.
Am I hearing that correctly?
Yeah, you might not. It might take you time to realize what the result is, but the result is immediate. It's like electricity. You turn it off, it's off. It might take you time to figure it out, right? Let's say, for example, you have most of your lights off in the house, right? And you've got a light in the toilet on. The electricity goes off. You won't notice that the electricity is off until you go to your toilet and see that the light is off, right? So the light was off the entire time. The result was immediate. By the time it took you to notice it, there might be a delay, but the result is immediate.
Can you say that example again?
So it is that if I have, I'm, in the middle of the day, right? So I've got all the lights off in the house because, it's daylight, so I don't need to have the lights on. And I leave the light in the bathroom because in the bathroom there's no window. So I leave the bathroom light on. And I'm in the lounge, and then the power goes off. I'll only notice that the power's gone off when I go into the toilet and suddenly I see the light is off. So was the power off immediately when the power went down? Yes. But the time it took me to notice it is only when I went to the bathroom. So the same thing with internal power. Your internal power might turn off, but until you've actually got a situation where you need to use it, it might actually take you that time until you figure it out that you've actually turned it off.
What, by not seeing a result?
Exactly.
So by not seeing a result of your using your internal power, you're like, oh well, I guess my internal power is off. I guess I'm not using it correctly.
Exactly.
Can you do like a thing, some kind of presentation of sure ways to lose your internal power? If you do this, boom, you'll show. If you do that, boom. Someday I would love to see the do's and don'ts of losing your internal power.
I agree with you that there's just so much detail to actually write about this stuff, practical detail, and that's why I'm going for the you could say the general goal, which is basically get people across the barrier, and then once there's enough people across the barrier, then we'll have enough scientists and we'll gain that expertise to be able to write all this material to make it easier. You know, I've already seen the difference that people using the current material are able to advance so much faster than ever before, and it's because the material, and that material is based on the experimentation that was done, and you know that will continue in the future. All right, I think we'll stop here and enter the after party.